Now, our topic for today is unlocking the potential of assistive technology for learning. And we are going to address 4 main topics: integrating universal design for learning, or UDL principles, universal tailoring assistive technology and non-tech tools, and policy reforms. We are going to start with Dr. Omollo on learning difficulties. So in recent discussions, there has been increasing attention on specific learning disabilities, ADHD, and other neurodivergent conditions. However, there seems to be a lack of clarity among many about what these conditions entail. Could you provide us a brief overview of what SLDs and ADHD are, and then walk us through the diagnosis process? Additionally, could you also shed light on the prevalence of these conditions within the African context?
That sounds like a full lecture. How much time do we have?
Very little, Dr. Omollo.
Okay. Well, they told me that if you can't summarize it to a 2-year-old in like 5 minutes, then you really don't know what you're talking about. So let me see if I really do know what I'm talking about. Learning disability is basically a general term that encompasses all those challenges that some people have. They're actually neurodevelopmental challenges, so they're not like those things that you kind of grow out of. And they affect, the main thing they do affect is the ability to learn, which briefly defined would be that ability you have to change your behavior upon undergoing a certain experience, or a relative change in behavior after an experience, which could be a learning experience, a social experience, an emotional experience, or that. So these disorders generally affect that particular ability, and they'll affect things like speech, things like reading, things like being able to do math, perform mathematical calculations, being able to engage adaptively in social interactions, because maybe sometimes they have difficulties reading nonverbal cues. In fact, there's a whole set there called the nonverbal learning disabilities, which have to do with that. So how do we even know that somebody has it? Typically, because it's developmental, we don't recognize them fully until a child goes to school, because then they are put in an active learning situation. And typically that's when the teachers or parents or somebody may pick up that there's some problem with this child, maybe difficulty reading, or when they're writing, they write things that are not consistent with what they're seeing, or something like that. And so typically that's when it will be observed, and perhaps an early diagnosis may occur. For many people, especially here in Africa, that's also a problem, because there are many who have gone through almost their entire schooling career before they got a proper diagnosis. Meanwhile, all the challenges they experienced with learning were given any number of labels, including witchcraft, and could be anything, nutrition, and name it, except that the child or the person had a learning disability. The learning disabilities will have what we call, in technical terms, comorbidities. That means that they're usually occurring with other problems. A most common one is attention deficit hyperactive, or a hyperactivity disorder, just popularly known by the initials ADHD. Now, what that entails is the person who, again, is a neurological disorder, but they're unable to be still enough in their head. They could be still and looking at you, but their head tends to wander, so they're unable to actually pay attention. Another type is the ones that are hyper, especially when they're a child. They cannot sit still. They're running up and down, and they just can't sit in one place to be able to benefit from the learning experience. A group of them have both attentional problems and hyperactive issues. And the ADHD diagnosis usually just require observation of that. We have tools that, of course, can assess that, but most times the teachers in the early stages will say, this fellow just can't concentrate to be able to learn a thing. Liz, you said that we talk a little bit about the diagnosis, right?
Very briefly, yes.
Very briefly. There are many different types of, say, the learning disabilities or difficulties. You may have heard of terms like dyslexia, which has to do with language, reading, spelling, comprehension of written language and things like that. Dysgraphia has to do with writing, inability to write. You've heard of dyscalculia, that has to do with math problems. They cannot do or perform mathematical operations because their brains just don't process that. At a neurological level, these are related to things like auditory processing disorders. That has to do with hearing. The connection between what they hear and the interpretation in the brain, something is wrong at a neurological level, and that causes problem. There is visual, spatial deficits that have to do with the eye and their hands and legs movement, and that can also be, at a neurological level, problematic for them. All of those will then constitute any number of those types. We diagnose them mostly through the use of psychological assessment tools, and there's some wonderful ones that have been developed. Some of them, if we have time, we'll be able to talk a little bit about them. But we do psychological assessments. There could be performance reviews, just based on their schoolwork and everything that they're doing. We could also, there are also medical tests that may need to be done since this is neurological. Very often I send my patients to, or clients to the doctors, neurologists and others, just to run things like MRI and all, just to see how their brains are actually functioning. But altogether, a good comprehensive, of course, there is also the family history, observations from the teachers, and all that kind of thing. All those would form a way to diagnose. I think I'll have to stop at that for now.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Dr. Omollo. That was very comprehensive. Now, after assessing, we find that sometimes we need to use some tools for intervention. Yeah? And this brings us to our question on universal design for learning, which is an educational approach that provides equal opportunity for all students. And with this in mind, with this concept in mind, we find that we may need some tools. And this brings us to you and what tools have been developed, at least from your end, that help with intervention for these learning difficulties.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Okay. Can I say one thing? Like here, how many of you know Chinese? How many of you know German? Great. How many of you know Hindi? How many of you know? There are more than 500 languages, you know? Okay, so here I can say one thing, like we need assistive solutions. Last week I was in Taiwan, and I don't know Chinese, Taiwanese. Here I am in Africa, here thankfully everyone is speaking English. Okay, coming to the point, we all are disabled or we all are abled. Okay, so solution here is, I am using my own product when I was in China to translate and summarize in English. So we have a lot of solutions. Like sir told, like we need hand and eye coordination. We have so many kits for hand and eye coordination. We have so many solutions for mathematical equation writing and mathematical equation learning. The same thing, the dyslexia. So whatever, we have a lot of OCR, ultra high accuracy OCR software we have developed. I can show you a demo if we have time. Whatever it read out any from printed material, a person can translate in any language, plus it will highlight what is speaking out. Okay, so there is lot of solutions, and those solutions available from like so many expensive products from developed countries. What we have done in India, we have made it super affordable. The same product which is available in US for highlighting the text, which is OCR, around $1,000 to $2,000, we are selling at $150. So this is what we have done. And this kind of AI reader, which is in my hand, and this kind of product, which is again in my hand, this is very useful for reading any printed material, and it will highlight, plus it will translate, or it will summarize, it will digitalize. And if I talk more on the empower side, so say example, I have to read any book, class 7 book. I did OCR, I can copy that and put into the Chromebook or any laptop with voiceover. I can copy and paste, and I can, with the help of like large print keyboards or different kind of assisted keyboards, inclusive keyboards, I can type lot of things, and I can be able to get higher numbers. I can be able to get higher education. And if I get higher education, there is a definitely chance to get me job opportunities. So this is how from childhood, and I'm happy to share, in India, we have created more than 150 inclusive schools where teacher putting a paper or textbook, and there is a projector, and with the simple OCR software, it will translate any printed content to a digital, and it will be highlighting plus auditized. So person can see what is getting highlighted, and it's a completely inclusive and sighted person, low vision. And you know, like India and developing countries like Africa, around 3% of the population having a print or language disabilities or learning disabilities.
All right.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So,
Just so we get time for the other questions.
yeah.
Do you see using the tool that you have,
Yeah.
how we can integrate it into a classroom setup?
So actually, we partner with a lot of organizations like Benetech. So Benetech has more than 1.3 million accessible books. It is also for all kind of impairments, print impairment, language impairment, or you can translate. So this is all about inclusive education. And we have all the solution for the students. Because if we target students, then only in next 2 to 3 years with proper training and proper special education teachers training, we can able to empower them.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Just maybe a last cooker. From what we have heard, in our African context, can we include this technology into teacher training, curriculum development, and day-to-day classroom practices to effectively support children with diverse abilities? This may be another technology.
Fantastic. So I definitely think tech is the way to go in terms of inclusion for learning disabilities. However, maybe I can share a few numbers from the EdTech community. Let me give an example of Kenya. Kenya has about 89% connectivity. Safaricom guys here can correct me in terms of internet. But do you know how much we use technology for learning? Only about 15 to 19% of teachers use it, and that went up during COVID. So when you talk about teachers training, there's a lot of awareness that needs to go into how can we use tech to include learners. So you mentioned the universal design. So the universal design, for those of you who are wondering what the jargon is that it's a method of teaching that uses many teaching styles, music, dance, touching, sensory, and that, but also is delivered using many platforms. So we can use tablets, we can use his technology, the screen, and even the traditional methods of learning. So when you combine that, it makes the universal design. So in teachers training, a lot of the training that has already happened has to do with how a teacher can run a classroom. And I work with, I've been upskilling some teachers in terms of on how to work in the disability space. So basically, you have to also include the inclusive learning styles. How does a teacher combine all those different methods of learning in class and combine the use of tech in class? So definitely teachers training needs to happen. If I had a magic wand, I would pray for, I usually call it blanket teachers training, like every teacher needs to be trained on how to support learners with disabilities within the classrooms. And this is because of again, the prevalence of learning disabilities. did you know that only 30% of disabilities are physical or can be seen? 70% it's us guys. I'm sure the people, some of you who's been talking to me the whole week are like, oh, we didn't know she has a disability. The crutches and ramps I have on my head are so many, because like if you notice I'm rocking, so that I do not lose the concentration. So the noise Dr. Omollo was talking about, I'm dealing with it outside. So how do we equip people to do that? How do we use tech to time? Then the other thing in terms of teachers training, again, is there's a psychological effect of having learning disabilities, because it's a brain structure difference. So it means there are some chemicals in my brain that are not balancing out. And if I have been put down for too long, what are the effects that I have that cause me now to start digging deeper into being unable to learn?
So just to catch you there, still in the same line, are there any obstacles that you can see in and deficiencies in accessing these assistive technologies in our setup?
Definitely. I wish every student has had the Google Chrome or the tool he's talking about. But really, even when the government has been trying to equip schools with tech, with computers and tech and tools that they can use to make using tech in class. However, many, again from the edtech space, the numbers, a lot of the headmasters have locked those things up in class, in a staff room, so that or in a room, so that they don't get lost. So there's also the uptake of tech by teachers is a bit slow. And again, it's because they need to relearn about what delivery of a lesson is. And so there needs to be a lot of sensitization that cannot only be done by government, but needs to be done by even stakeholders. How do we educate teachers to show them that tech makes life easier for them? So accessibility in terms of gadgets are expensive. What is the security of these gadgets? What is loaded on the gadget? And I'm happy to hear that, yes, that you have thousands of books. Yesterday, there was a talk about not having enough disability accessible books for learners. And so those are the things that need to be put in place. So yeah, the availability of tech, Kenya has 89%. If I go to South Sudan, I probably get 2% connectivity. So there's a lot of work here that needs to be done in terms of infrastructure and availability, distribution of that tech.
Yes, thank you for that. That's true. We are still progressing in using technology in our setup. Dr. Omollo, any non-technical tools to suit the diverse requirements and cultural context of individuals with learning disability, also while considering factors such as language, culture, and socioeconomic status? Do you feel the education systems can formulate a strategy, a more holistic strategy, to get not only tech tools, but also non-tech tools? Yeah.
Yes. It's very doable, and the reason I say that with so much confidence is because it's been done in other countries. That was awesome hearing what they're doing over there in India, and in fact, we don't need to reinvent technology. Please give me your number. I will send it to Mashogu after this and tell him, here's a really good idea I learned, or something we can start doing, like hopefully they have some little money to do it, or at least on a piloting basis. But yes, we also, I believe education is only useful to the extent that it is able to be applied to the specific culture, that it's able to seize upon the resources available in that culture and translate them into ways to make life possible for the people living in that culture. Anytime we've borrowed too much from elsewhere, it hasn't really worked. In fact, it becomes quickly irrelevant. So there's need to review that, and I think the Ministry of Education, they have done a good job with the CBC thing. Of course, there's still some challenges with that, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Can I add something? I create content that's inclusive for learners because I have a son with ADHD and dyslexia, so we started that as a homeschooler. It takes 1 hour 46 minutes to create an inclusive class, an inclusive lesson. So if I'm going to make one math lesson inclusive, it's going to take that long. So basically, it means even for teachers to prep, even if they have an understanding of what inclusion looks like for learners, it demands a lot of time. So maybe even when you're thinking about inclusive classes, as we structure curriculums, as we structure delivery of curriculums, is there a way that they can already come as inclusive tools that can be applied in the classroom directly? Or how can we start with the different stakeholders to be able now to start creating content that can be inclusive in our classrooms?
Well, yeah, that is true. And as you are speaking and Dr. Omollo is speaking, I'm also thinking about the tools that we use, say, for assessment, and the fact that they are not culturally friendly, or sometimes even the socioeconomic status of our learners here in our country are not, they're unable to respond to some of those items, especially intelligence tools, academic tools even that we use. Since we use mostly tools from the West, we still don't have tools that are Afrocentric. So for the next question, maybe I can still go back to you, Kuka. What strategies can be employed to harness the involvement of parents and communities in advocating for inclusive education policies, promoting acceptance, and establishing crucial support systems for learners with disability in African settings? Maybe, Dr. Omollo, you can answer about parents and acceptance, because we find a lot of that in the clinical psychology once we do the assessments.
Okay, fantastic. I'll use an acronym called AAI. First of all, we are talking about learning disability. You've noticed Dr. Omollo had to educate a lot of us of what those look like. So the awareness is wanting in Africa. We've just started. Actually, the whole world has just started creating conscious awareness about specific learning disabilities and neurodivergence. So basically, there needs to be, do you know the way, how many of us know the symptoms of COVID-19? Because they were spoken to you and you know. So you can imagine a lot of people in Africa live their lives not knowing that they have neurodivergence, and so they keep questioning themselves about why they feel the way they do and why they behave the way they do. So awareness is key, and blank and like large-scale awareness so that people can know where to seek help. Then assessments. Proper assessments. I started working in this space because of the number of lies I got from people who did not understand proper assessments. And so it was such a relief to meet you today, Liz, and Dr. Omollo was my professor, so I was so happy to see him. Because people do not, if you're not aware, you don't know where to seek proper assessments. And then, so if you don't get proper assessments early, the interventions will be wanting. Quick number before I go. 70% of kids in juvenile in the US and Europe have learning disabilities, specific learning disabilities, and like dyslexia. 40% of self-made billionaires have specific learning disabilities. So you guys are looking at a potential billionaire. But how do we bridge? Most of these guys who we know are successful, and we talk about like Richard Branson and all those guys, were supported by caregivers, by parents who decided, get out of school and let's learn. So what do we do to be able to bridge the gap between assessment and proper interventions for success? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kuka. Yes, Dr. Omollo,
Yeah,
as we have
I
our
came
last 2
across
minutes.
this very interesting survey on when I was reading up some of these things, looking for the epidemiological studies. The question asked, what do you think is the most important factor in creating an environment that is supportive of neurodiversity? And the results were interesting because the choices were education, awareness, acceptance, and empathy. The winner, what do you think? Awareness came on the top with 32%. Acceptance was next at 29%. Education at 23%, and the last was empathy at 16%. Clearly, even the participants were in agreement that awareness. The relationship between awareness and acceptance is that the order is important. It is difficult to accept without awareness. It is important that people become aware. And I think as we think about intervention, for example, it's mentioned earlier on when I was giving the definitions in the introduction that when people have gone through their entire schooling career and nobody caught up that they were having struggles or even a diagnosable severe learning disability, it's an awareness problem. The teachers didn't know, the parents didn't know, and so there's room for some work to be done in terms of thinking strategically, thinking in creative ways like this and many other forums to actually create awareness. Our public education system, I think we need to pour in some resources there. I think now we have a good number of special educators and psychologists, perhaps to do something in that through forums. It's going to have to be collective because of expenses, but awareness is key. With awareness, I think, comes acceptance. Many parents, when their child is first diagnosed with some kind of learning disability, you know what their first reaction is? Denial. No, it's not. And even the parent themselves often have ADHD or something and they can't see it in their child. And so I think that's an important thing. That's how I would answer that for now.
I agree. Being aware of whatever it is that your child is going through in their learning experience is important, and then accepting, and then supporting that child. Really, really brings a lot of transformation. Takes away the stigma, takes away self-stigma from the child, and basically provides us with better outcomes. So as we come to a conclusion, another thing maybe that I'd like to add, in our setup in most of our African countries and in Kenya also specifically, we find that we do not have the tools, or the tools are very expensive, to assess children in the general population or in the public schools. So that has brought with it a lot of challenges. And maybe we appeal also to our Ministry of Education, if we have representation, to provide those tools in organizations such as KISE, Kenya Institute of Special Education, so everybody can have access to assessment. So as we end, the key points.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry.
One more thing.
Our time is up.
Just
one line.
Our time
just
is
one.
up. Okay.
Because we didn't touch policy. In terms of policy, as you're saying, if assessments can be Afrocentric, affordable, and then we can push for policy for testing at the right ages, when they enter school, in middle school, and in high school, so that we have children, we have more billionaires instead of criminals, that's all.
Thank you for that.
So you have pointed very rightly. So what we did in India and why we have one of the largest impact in India, because we have created awareness. We have created awareness in online and offline. Then we provided availability of assistive solutions. And third is acceptability. And fourth is affordability. So these 4 A's help us. So we have in India more than 200 experience centers in every district. So this experience center, people with disability can come and diagnose with disabilities or something, and they can see what kind of solutions they are getting. So the awareness, availability, acceptability, and affordability of assistive aids, these are the 4 A's which I want to share. Like if we do in Africa, we look for the partners. We have more than 700 solutions. We look for the partners, how we can provide these 4 A's in Africa, which makes Africa A more accessible, more inclusive. So this is I look for the partners. Thank you so much.
Yes, we will definitely find a way to partner because we do need that technology. Thank you for that. So key points to take home. It's important to have continued efforts to promote inclusive education and support learners with learning disabilities in Africa. And it is important that we who work with these learners engage in further discussions and collaborations to address both challenges and opportunities related to this critical issue. So I will ask that we give a hand of applause to my great panelists.